Hello, I'm Bailey Lazier, and I'm back after a couple weeks off since my Super Bowl recap video. As I'm, for the first time in, about 4 months, I'm doing a baseball-related video as I will talk about the slow and longful 2018-19 MLB offseason. So this video will obviously be split into two parts as the first will be I will be talking about trades, extensions, and other non-related free agent signing moves that happened in this 2018-19 MLB offseason. And also, to start off the video, I'm going to just talk about my overall thoughts on the 2018-19 MLB offseason. I gotta say, this was really slow. I mean, it took a while for some of the top baseball stars to get signed, such as Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. It took a long time, and I don't know if that's just the state baseballs is in these days, or just owners just didn't, they didn't want to give, they were really holding out on giving these big $300 million contracts to these players, 200, 250, hundreds of millions of dollars just on one player. So I don't know what it was and why it was so slow. Leave in the comments section below on what you thought. Why do you thought the MLB offseason was so slow to begin with? So some of the trades that happened, I'm going to be talking about. First one, I'm going to start off with the Seattle Mariners made a lot of trades. Probably as they're going to be retooling their roster or just going for a rebuild. One of the first trades they started out with, they traded one of their top pitchers last year who threw a no-hitter, James Paxton. They traded him to the Yankees. Overall, I got to say with this deal, this was, the Yankees got a pretty good pitcher, and it was really kind of a surprise Seattle was gonna blow up their roster. I really thought Seattle, they had a very good start, and but unfortunately in the second half it just didn't execute for them. But I don't know what happened there for Seattle. They made other moves. They traded Edwin Diaz, one of the top closers in baseball, and Robinson Cano to the New York Mets got a pretty good haul for them. Jay Bruce, Jared Kelenic, I think I'm saying that, hopefully saying that right. Justin Dunn and Anthony Swarzak from the Mets. I gotta say this was a much better deal for the Mets. They got some great pieces, the Mariners. I think this was a better trade than the James Paxton trade. They got some great pieces. Got a huge haul just for two players, especially Robinson Cano, who was in the news a lot last year for some not great reasons, such as the PED suspensions. He's definitely whatever's left of that contract, the Mets will take, or at least take a big chunk of that. And plus, he's an aging star as well. So I think the Diaz was probably a piece they didn't want to give up, just because he was one of the top closers in baseball last season. But I think it worked out probably for both teams. But I think the Mariners, they won that trade over what they got in this deal. They made some other trades in the offseason. Those weren't the only two moves they made. The Mariners traded Gene Segura, Juan Nicasio, James Pezos to the Phillies for J.P. Crawford and Carlos Santana. They also traded for Edwin Encarnacion as he came from the Indians. The Indians got Carlos Santana and Jake Powers, Yandy Diaz, and a player to be named later. So they made a lot of moves to probably retool their roster. And, some of those moves were okay. I think the problem with the Mariners was they just had a really good start last season, just weren't good in the second half. So maybe they're trying to shed that. But I'm not sure they can do that in the American League this year. And then probably the biggest trade that was definitely under my radar, considering I'm from Arizona, and a trade that made many Diamondback fans very sad. It was pretty much clear that the Diamondbacks, considering how prospects and money is very tight in this organization due to moves that have been made in the past by previous GMs and just the mistakes of previous GMs, just not being able to pay guys and, throwing money at, a couple players, which has really tied up their roster and their farm system being really barren right now. Even with one year left on that option they picked up and signed The Arizona Diamondbacks traded star player Paul Goldschmidt to the St. Louis Cardinals for Luke Weaver, Carson Kelly, Andrew Young, and a 2019 comp pick. Not the only big name player they lost, but that was the key trade that they made. And I just gotta say, like the first off, the St. Louis Cardinals, they didn't even have to give up some of their other big young players like Harrison Bader or any of those guys. So probably the St. Louis Cardinals, they definitely won that trade. But just for the Diamondbacks, I mean, it's so weird that they are deciding to rebuild after only being competitive for what, 2 years. I mean, I think it's definitely going to be a move that hurts whatever attendance they had. Not really a knock on them. They actually had pretty good attendance coming off from the previous year where they were a playoff team. But I think it's definitely going to hurt them, especially considering a lot of players left in free agency, just such as Daniel Scalzo, A.J. Pollock, Patrick Corbin, and some other players. So that was definitely, and I think the Diamondbacks going into this season just are looking like they are lacking in an identity, and definitely that will happen when you lose your star player who's been your star player for the last 7 or 8 years. So another big trade that happened early on was the Los Angeles Dodgers. They traded, kind of surprised with some of the trades they made. They traded Yasiel Puig, Matt Kemp, who was an All-Star last year, Kyle Farmer, and Alex Wood, who was an All-Star in 2017, to the Cincinnati Reds for Homer Bailey and a couple other players in that deal that I'll put in my description below. But I gotta say, this deal did free up some of the outfield depth that the Dodgers probably wanted. I know they were definitely looking at Bryce Harper after this deal, but unfortunately for them, they could not come to an agreement or could not sign him, even though they were interested in him. But I gotta say, Cincinnati, they got a great haul of players. I mean, Cincinnati wasn't as bad as they have been for the last couple of years, the previous season. But I think they definitely want to get up in the standings. I mean, they're probably in the toughest division in baseball with the Cubs, the Brewers, the St. Louis Cardinals, and so forth. But I think they got some great players, and I think these players that have kind of, for the Dodgers, that those players such as Puig and Kemp were definitely not everyday starters for LA. I think they'll be everyday starters for the Cincinnati Reds. That was the only deal that they made, as they traded for Sonny Gray from the New York Yankees, and they immediately signed him to an extension. So I think Cincinnati definitely decided to make some moves, and I think it's good on their part, and hopefully that impacts them. They're able to move up in the standings for the 2019 MLB season. So another trade that happened that was took a little bit of while to develop, as he was linked to several teams, including the Mets. But the last big star for the Miami Marlins, JT Realmuto, he was traded to the Philadelphia Phillies. Another big move that the Phillies made this offseason. He was traded to the Phillies in exchange for Jorge Alfaro, Sixto Sanchez, Will Stewart, and $250,000 in international bonus slot money. But the Phillies made another great move. I think this definitely, helps the catcher position for them, and another bat that they put in, along with signing a couple other players that I will talk about in my next video. But it was definitely a huge move for them, and another great player to add in their lineup. And I think he maybe he isn't the greatest defensive player, but it's very hard to come by with offensive catchers. And they get a big bat in Real Muto. And then probably one of the biggest, an extension that happened, Nolan Arenado. He got a big extension, $246 million 8-year extension with the Colorado Rockies. This is a huge deal. A lot of money got thrown around, mainly in free agency. But Arenado, I think that after they got Charlie Blackmon's extension worked out, and definitely after they lost DJ LeMahieu, I think the Rockies definitely want to lock down one of the best third basemen in all of baseball. And I got to say, from the players like Machado and Harper and what money they got, I think this is a good deal from the money standpoint. I think he's the highest paid. One of the highest paid infielders when it comes to money per year, or he's definitely one of the highest. But I think this is a good deal for the Rock. That's it for my video. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'm glad I'm back on the channel. Expect more videos from me soon. Check out for part 2 coming soon on my channel. As always, follow me on Twitter at BaileyLeisure96. Click like if you liked the video. Subscribe and leave your comments below on what you thought of the 2018-19 MLB offseason this year.